People born into rich families but now live in the middle lower class. What happened? My mom has about $2 million in assets. When she passes I will be getting most of it. Until then I'll be working my middle class job making a middle class income. I'd rather have mom than the $2 million. Let's compromise. You keep your mom and I'll take the $2 million. I think that's fair. My parents were rich. I am not. I think a lot of people tend to forget that the children of rich parents do want to have a life of their own. I grew up very privileged and right now I am living in a real cheap apartment with barely any income because I want to make it on my own. Because in the end you want to say that what you have is yours and not given to you by someone else. My family's business went belly up in the downturn. My wife also had a business with her mom and sister. They figured out that they could have more money if they fired her, so they did. One day a letter came from a courier that said they had changed the locks and cancelled her work CC and phone. This all happened to us in the same year. Went from making $200,000.00 a year to now making $50,000.00. Wasn't very fun. Learned a lot about ourselves and the way the world works. Although I don't know what I did wrong, I do still believe in karma and know it will work out okay. We moved from a third world country to a first world country. Same experience. Used to live in Kabul, Afghanistan for 4 years. Greatest time of my life. We had maids, guards, and drivers. Owned 4 cars and lived in a huge house in the nice part of town. I had so many cousins and friends that every week brought a new experience. Whether it was playing cards all night or going on a road trip. However, we moved to America because my dad wanted to get citizenship. Moved back to America. And I find myself as an average middle class person. Really affected me. Going from 1% to 99% is a rough ride. Worst part was that everyone was content at being average and mediocre. 100% would move back to Afghanistan. 2008 happened. 2008 we went from upper middle class to lower middle class. Parents lost a lot of their investments. But they were still able to live happily. My parents worked hard and got to where they were. The crash happened. And they knew what to do. I'm happy that they're happy. Meanwhile, I'm 100k in debt from school and a car. And slowly paying it off without too much help from them. Which makes me happy. My parents gave me a full ride to college and set me free. I married a girl who works seasonally, so we live paycheck to paycheck. We are both happy with life, but money is always an issue. When I hear a seasonal worker I think forest firefighter or some sort of science field tech type job. You work hard 6 months out of the year to earn a year's salary. What's she doing that doesn't pay well and is only seasonal? Not really on subject. But an ancestor of mine was quite high up in Bell Telecom and was offered a third of the company. He declined. Saying that the telephone would come to little and it was just a stupid invention. And that, folks, is why I'm middle class. My great grandfather was in a similar situation with Walmart, though on a bit smaller scale. His reason was moral disagreement with the company though, rather than denial of it being a wise investment. Which I respect. Just think of it this way though, if the pieces hadn't fallen the way they did, you probably wouldn't exist. Grandpa got caught crossing the border with a trailer full of dope. Story time. Uncle needed to get some product from a buddy up in Canada but felt he watched last time. Grandpa figured that they wouldn't stop a 60+ YO man crossing the border. So he offered to go up. Well, Grandpa and Uncle both had the same first last name and no one thought about that. Grandpa got stopped and searched at the border. They found a large supply on him. Government did an audit of his finances and decided that nothing he owned was bought with drug money. But a few things popped up on my uncle during the audit. Uncle had helped finance homes for most of the family and so the homes were seized. Including the house my parents and I lived in. 4 BD. 2 BTH. 10 acres. Mom lost her job running a chain of gas stations. Dad got laid off. Parents couldn't afford another house without a large down payment. Spent every cent 4 years trying to afford a 2 BD. 1 BTH in the ghetto. Initially my parents were worth, edit, 7 figures during the 90s. Now they're probably worth 130k. My father was a real estate agent here in California. The market crashed and he lost all his homes. Now he's about $50 million in debt. Edit, accidentally put 5 billion. It is actually 50 million. My family owned a large proportion of the southwest UK. When one generation of go-getters died, the next generation couldn't be asked with all that stress and work, and handed the financial responsibility to bankers and lawyers who 1. Invested heavily in the railways 2 months before it was nationalized. 2. Invested heavily in Germany right before WW2. Particularly in booming medium-sized industrial companies based in the Ruhr. 3. Stole a not inconsiderable amount of money themselves. Then they retired, handing the family back less than 5% of the original capital, land. Only a few acres remain, thanks to several generations of bad management and death duty. Sounds like Arrested Development. There's always money in the banana stand. Parents lost everything. Twice. Life savings wiped out when the bank they had their savings in collapsed overnight. Dad rebuilt everything from scratch only to have corrupt swindlers who bought the company he was the GM of fire him and freeze assets when he refused to help them launder money. They seized everything. I was 17 when we were thrown out of our house. He sued, but the case took 10+ years to resolve. The settlement was halved by the judge for an inexplicable reason after their last appeal failed, which was just enough to cover their debts for 10 years. My dad is a broken man. Depression lead to dementia and he doesn't even know when it's day or night. My brother, sister and I have been supporting them for the last 10 years. Everything I've built has been with no support other than my own head and hands. And I live in perpetual fear that it could disappear overnight. My life fell apart and they didn't care, so we became estranged. Then I found out they were telling people it was because I was angry at them for not giving me enough money. I don't hate them or anything, but I basically quit the family in disgust. I never asked for or expected money from them. All I wanted was for them to actually care about me. Me. My dad left my family about $2 million from life insurance. I ducked up royally. I got into pills. I went crazy with my inheritance. I'm ashamed of all of it. Both my mom and myself are barely scraping by with what little is left, which is basically ducking nothing. We all lost everything. Completely my fault. I met someone from England, my mom flew him down here, he mooched. He got deported. My last ex mooched until we had nothing but the guitars my dad bought me before he died, and my ex hawked them all while I was trying to save face. I dropped out of 2 colleges. I'm just the worst ever. My father helped design the X-15 for Boeing and the USAF and also designed the robots that tested the spacesuits for the Gemini and Mercury space programs. We had a beautiful house at the top of Los Altos Hills in Palo Alto and were considered pretty well off. My dad's accountant stole all the money in the late 70s and we ended up penniless. We never fully recovered, although he continued to invent products. Nothing was so grandiose as his aerospace days. When he died in 1986 we were almost penniless and everything we had left was auctioned off to pay for tax debts, and I lived with foster parents until I turned 18. Had I not had that happen, I probably would have been a spoiled little sheep like those people I dislike today that grow up entitled and irresponsible. I'm 45 now and in the middle class working in a help desk. I love my job and my life. Everything we went through made me a better person. My dad makes $300,000 a year, solidly upper middle class. Probably not rich, but he is terrible with money. He is in a lot of debt and has almost no retirement fund, not even a year's worth on money. I'm paying through college on my own, working a blue-collar job. My mother's paternal grandmother was extremely well-to-do. I'm talking friends with European royalty. She disowned my grandfather for marrying my whore of a grandmother. Well, as a kid, I lived pretty well. My dad owned his own business and did well for himself. nice cars, boats, vacations, and anything I wanted, and I never even asked. But then my mom left him. We did fine for a few years because he hid his pain with booze, parties, and 20-year-old girlfriends. Suddenly, I don't know why, all that stopped. And he fell into deep depression. And just literally stopped working. With no money coming in. We lost our home. Most of my stuff. And we even had to give my dogs to our grandparents to take care of. After selling his nice car for extra cash, he bought a retired ice cream truck. And that is where I lived. Kids would run after my car, expecting to get ice cream. It was hilarious. And as far as being homeless goes, the ice cream truck was as good as it gets. It even had a mattress in the back. For 3 months, we parked on Santa Monica Beach and kind of hung out there. My dad stole food, and we had one McDonald's cup we would constantly refill. I didn't wash my clothes for months and showered in sinks. But honestly, there are worse ways to be homeless than to hang out in Santa Monica. The recession in California hit us. But growing up, my family had always owned a flooring window covering store, and we were pretty well off. We had a big house, big backyard, blah blah blah. Well, in 2008 our business failed. Our house was foreclosed and we moved to Texas with almost nothing. Living with my grandparents for a while, and my parents had to start over from the ground up. Neither of them went to college, so they had nothing to fall back on, but my mother is now a retail manager and my father builds nature blinds. We're middle class and everything's great. Nowhere where we used to be, but we have a house full of food and love. I'm in college and pay my own rent and work 2 jobs. I'm only 19. All because of this experience, and to be honest, I guess you could say I'm grateful because of what it taught me, and it made my family stronger. I was adopted by upper middle class parents. My mom passed away from cancer when I was 14. At which point my dad blew a good chunk of my inheritance college fund on Drew Gus. I have a BA but still barely get by at this point. Not sure whether I will be able to afford to go to graduate school. Rest of my family is pretty much useless. Somehow. Still. With a robust criminal record. My dad now works for the state legislature. My father was an orthopedic surgeon. He did an amazing amount of pro bono work, so he isn't as rich as you would expect an orthopedic surgeon to be. But he has plenty of money. I'm in grad school right now, finishing a master's in biology. And I'm trying to handle it on my own. My parents do cover my car insurance and have kept my eye on the family cell phone plan. But I take care of the rest. For the first year or so of grad school, every time I talked to my dad, he would offer to cover my tuition and rent for me, but I kept declining. I think he just wanted to help and to be sure I had a decent standard of living. But he didn't understand that I needed to support myself in order to feel like a man. Either my mom explained that to him or he just gave up. Because he finally stopped offering to support me. So yeah. I'm pretty poor right now, but it's only temporary. I'll most likely never be very wealthy. But I should be able to net a pretty decent income once I'm done with school. Mom got a divorce with dad. My grandparents were rich. But they literally spent it all. They also didn't mind the business that made them rich. They put my dad in charge, and he had no experience. My dad is fairly well off. But he's the stingiest person I know. He also made a lot of bad investments, and although he still has plenty, he is not very supportive of me and has spent way less on me than he has lost in many individually bad investments. When I was younger, I got to do things that many people don't, like summer camp and a private middle school. So I can't really complain.